Hello, everybody. Really excited to be back with you today. I was able to clean up some of the mess that was right here in my space from World Collage Day, and just in time to make more mess with you all today. So what we're going to do is talk about how to finish an art journal, like what to do with some of those awkward pages that might be there, ones that you started and didn't quite finish. We'll play more with some of the different media that we received in this box. And we'll talk about some of the stuff that comes up when you're nearing the end of a journal and at the end of a season too, right? We've got a little while still till summer, but it's definitely starting to get warmer here. Got short sleeves on, and that's what's going on around here. And so let's go to the big pile of journals that I have on the desk here. And so got some really good side views going on here. So I'm going to start in this journal, which is the official journal for spring. And since you've seen this journal last, I've worked a little bit more on the cover. One of the things I discovered is something that can happen when you mix different adhesives together, meaning sometimes if you mix Elmer's and a matte medium, or in this case, it was matte medium and this liquid glass, which is like a raised up clear stuff, you can get a crackle effect without using crackle medium. So I didn't use crackle medium on this, and I was able to get this interesting crackling happen. So I started putting a little bit of color back into there with the Lyra art brushes, and this here you can see where the liquid glass is acting as normal, and then here is where it came in contact with the matte medium. So I just think stuff like that is super interesting, and it's why I would really like to play with different media and mix them together maybe in unconventional ways just to see what happens. So I wanted to spend just a tiny bit of time before I dive more into this journal, just bringing the cover a little bit more to a completed place. It might not be all the way finished, but I did want to brush around more of this Lyra color. So this is the aqua brush color, just straight onto the cover. There's a little bit of wax crayon on here and some different adhesives, and I'm just putting a little watercolor on now to move the Lyra around and add a little bit more visual interest, maybe play up some of these crackles, help them show up a little bit more. The other thing that would work for doing this is like alcohol ink, but it can get away from you. So sometimes I'm a little hesitant to do that on a journal as it's getting closer to the end, especially when we're talking about the cover. But I love the way that's looking. So if you received a bird in this season's ephemera pack that maybe wasn't your favorite bird, don't worry. Some of you may get a different bird in next season's ephemera pack. So I had a couple other birds that didn't make the cut for this one, and there are a few more birds that are flying their way towards you in the next box. All right, so I'm going to let that dry. The last thing I'll do on the cover is probably some like big stripe of color down the spine. Inside front cover I haven't done yet. This one I did in the first session. So I don't really know what I want to do there yet, so we'll come back to that. And one thing that I like to do is I'm thinking about ending a journal, and this one has quite a few pages left in it. And that sometimes happens, right? Especially if you're like me and you have multiple journals going at once. Sometimes you'll end up with quite a few pages. So I want to show how to finish those up, right? So I like to flip through sometimes and just kind of see status check. Where am I with some of these pages? And if I am emotionally done with the page, even if it doesn't feel creatively done, I find it helpful to just put a border on the page and just say, okay, I framed it, it's done, I'm moving on, right? This is a very particular moment in time, and it didn't quite feel done, but now that this color is around the edges, it feels quite a bit more finished. This one I did on the first live stream. This was the 1, 2, 3 exercise. Only thing I came back in and did is added a little matte medium here to make that edge stick a little better. This was a very colorful journal. And here's where I said I was going to do some writing and I didn't get around to it. So one of the things I was thinking I could do is talk about a little more about writing in a journal and some of the different ways that we might do it. So I'm going to take, this is acrylic ink, and I'm going to write with the dropper itself. And I'm writing kind of big, so that means I'm going to have to let this dry for a while, but that's okay. So if you're not sure what you want to do or what you want to write, I think I've talked about this before, but I'll start with today I, and then just finish that sentence. So since we're here on this page and I got some paint running around, this is a very messy brush that's seen a lot of different media and, oops, sorry, long-handled brush, too close to the camera. It just has a different voice, right, than a brand new clean brush. It also has a really nice sound to it. Some good ink bubbles going on here that I can pop and then can soak up some of this and just move it around. And you can see the other thing that happens when you draw with the dropper or write with the dropper is it moves to the edge, right? If you're doing wet ink or wet acrylic ink on paper, it'll move to the edge of your writing and you can kind of hollow it out or turn down the intensity in the middle of the letter forms. This is something else I've been playing with quite a bit recently. I'm not sure why, but just kind of going up to the edge of something that's already there and leaving a little white space around it feels satisfying to me. The other way you could do what I'm doing right now, if you didn't have a messy brush around, is take a little bit of paper towel and roll it between your fingers and then dab up some of that leftover paint with that. So really, really, really like the way this turquoise acrylic ink is looking with the warm colors that came through from the other side. A nice color combination that I feel really happy about. Now these lines that I had originally planned on writing in end up looking more like design. So, you know, one of the gifts of working in an art journal is you might have certain ideas about how a page is going to go, and you're really, really well served by letting it evolve as you do, right? And letting it change as you need. So you might have an original idea for what you're going to do on a page or with a piece of ephemera, and you're just going to feel a lot better about the process if you can let go of your ideas about what it's going to look like in the end and just let yourself enjoy it. And I think I've seen that from quite a few of you on Mix, where you've started one page one way and then it ended up being about something else, or you did something starting it on the live stream and kept working with it and turned into some kind of a very interesting story for you. It makes me excited to hear that that's happening. That's certainly one of the things I love about art journaling. Okay, so this is pretty wet acrylic ink. I'm going to set it aside and pull up another journal for a bit while that one dries. So this is the auxiliary ArtJournalSnacks journal that I've been working in, some of the stuff from World Collage Day, this page that I finished. This book is very close to done, so I'm just going to flip through. There's some still lifes in here. and some interesting collages. I just love this stack of books. Look at the side of those books. So drawing of Sammy. This is packing material that made this wonderful pattern. One of the residents had it where I work. She had it in her supplies, and we pulled it out, and she said, "What should I do with this?" And I said, "Let's take it to the studio and see what happens if we put rubber stamp ink on it." And this is what happens. It looks like it's been knitted or something. A little bit of extra fiber there. Bubble wrap print, more bubble wrap print. Some of these pages you've seen. This one has the little wing that comes up. How these people finished out. Self-portrait from travel. Letter to a coworker. From visiting a gallery. This is a rubbing from the art therapy studio up in Oregon, Lewis and Clark College. I did a rubbing from the studio door, and I don't know what the moon has to do with that, but it's enjoyable. More still life. These were 3 prints from my thermal printer of the same photograph, but just increasing the contrast for each of them. This page has a lot of texture on it. It's really satisfying. So this is one of those pages that feels like it's almost there, but I'm just not sure what else to do with it. So it has some stickers from some different food items. It has some of that liquid glass stuff, making quotation marks. Some thoughts that I wrote on there, but it just doesn't quite feel done. So since I have a little bit of this acrylic ink on this brush, I'm just going to clean off my brush on here. Get the page nice and wet and hide a little bit of this writing just to make that one word so I went over the one word with the liquid glass so it would resist a little bit more. You could also do that with the clear blender crayon. So now this is pretty wet, and just check the other side to make sure it goes, yeah. And I'm going to take the pink Lyra pen, and with a pen like this, your impulse very often is to hold it like you would normally hold a writing pencil. So I would encourage you to hold it all the way back at the very end, and just let it make some marks. And they might be a little bit messy, and you can experiment with working on the side or making them line as fine as you can, going into the gutter of the page and on to the next page, back. So starting to take some of the pink, watercolor, and other pigments that are on this page and incorporate it a little bit more. This is what we talked about before with this idea of like trying to make the page have a conversation between the two sides. Okay, so since the Lyra pens are water soluble, move them around a little bit. And I can bring out the bright white of the liquid glass on here. This whole time, this whole box has really been a lot about resist in various different ways. It's fun to play with all the different ways that we can do that, whether it's with adhesive that's down on the page, or clear, or white, wax, or other things that can create that resist of pigment that we put down. And so you're both working with and against the resist, right? You're working with it in that you're using it as a design element, and you're working against it in that you're adding pigment right up to the edge of it, right? So right here. So this is now starting to feel more cohesive to me, like less like a bunch of random pieces on the page. It's also one of the things that I love about working in a journal that's close to done. Is you can see when you do a rubbing that you're picking up on all these other textures, right? The page just before this has a lot of line work textures into it. And so this rubbing with this red colored pencil stick is really pulling that up quite a bit. And if you want to get into the gutter of a page that is in a journal that's very well loved already, you can fold it back on itself. The thing you're never supposed to do to your library book, right? Like, don't do this to your fine piece of literature, but totally fine to do to your art journal. Don't tell the librarians I told you to do this. This feels, like I said, quite a bit better. Is it all the way done? I'm not sure, but I'm going to keep going. Now I've got this page, and you can see this little bit showing through from that other page there. And then this is Olo marker and watercolor. And I really love the way that the Olo marker comes through onto the next page. So then your pages start to be in conversation with each other. Right? And that's one of the things that I really love about art journaling, is the way that you can continue to tell a story as you go from one page to the next. It's a little piece of scrapbook paper that I think it probably started hanging out in my art journal stuff way, way back when we first started this. It's just kind of been floating around. So it feels sad. So it's going to finally go in here. Plus color wise, I think it looks good with this. And then this little piece, which is left over from the last live stream, one of the things I was thinking I could do with the shape of it is cut it into some concentric shapes and use those as design elements on here. And this is kind of thick paper, so it's a really good use case for the tacky glue. Interesting. It kind of started out as a strange little shape, and it's becoming like a little teardrop or maybe a drop of blood. The color. Okay. So I've got all my little pieces, and we got a little bit, because again, this is thick paper, they get a little warped when you cut them. And you could take the tacky glue and put them on the back of each of these, but I'm also thinking that sounds a little bit tedious and messy. So what if I just really go with the messiness? This is Mod Podge in a brush applicator bottle that's been reused several times, and the brush looks pretty beat up, which I actually love because it means that the brushy effect that it's putting onto the paper is extra messy. And when you use that as resist, it creates these really interesting effects. So I'm just going to start to put these little guys down, find a spaces where they can live. And if they might not stick down perfectly all the way at first, but I can at least get them into place and then come back and put more adhesive over the top. Idea of this one having a drop shape, and then another one that kind of has another drop shape near it. The third one can be over here. You can see they're peeling up a little bit. So I'm going to go back over the top of this with some more Mod Podge. And don't be afraid to use your different adhesive mediums, whether that's glue stick or tacky glue or Mod Podge or matte medium or any of these things. Like, go for it, right? Because there are lots of ways that you can use that then to create more texture. This is just a plain old pencil, and I'm scratching into the surface to draw some lines that accentuate and play with the shapes. And when this dries, those lines will be raised up, almost like they're embossed and debossed at the same time. And then I can play with that texture even a little bit more. And let's set this gluey mess aside. And let's come back to this one, which you can see it's getting pretty well dried. It's coming along. But I know if I close that book right now, it will definitely stick. So never fear, I've got some wax paper. And it might mess up the lettering a little bit, but I am okay with that. And put some wax paper in here so that I can keep turning the page. So this, all these black lines I was actually creating with a Q-tip in black ink while I was chatting with the resident during an open studio. And I really liked the way that the Q-tip, as it got more saturated with the black ink, became a more interesting marking tool, especially on this textured paper. There's one of the images from the yearbook, and then again, I love the conversation happening between these two things. I was thinking originally that I might write something here, but I like to alternate between having a lot of text in my journal and having pages that are more like this, right? There's a tiny bit of text in these numbers, but other than that, just the marks that I made with the ink saturated Q-tip. They almost became geometric over here. This is when it was really getting messy. And this is one of those pages that could maybe be taken further, but I feel like it's better to just say, like, nope, that's a record of a certain day and a certain time. Same thing here, like something could live on this page, but I really like the texture. I like the subtlety of the color. This is that same Q-tip, making more marks here. And same thing here. Because then, like, you need the breathing room before you get to this really wild page. Has a lot of melted crayon on it, and some media that you'll get familiar with in the next box. And I think that one feels done as well. The still life page with some leaf rubbings. I did the leaf rubbings first, knowing I was going to work on still life. So that was fun to do. And then when you do one leaf rubbing, then you get the other side where you have the debossing from where the leaf was. So I did more leaf rubbings on this page and writing. And then these were some edges I caught up with something else and then just responded with the Digi crayon and a little bit of watercolor. This one you saw on the last live stream. This one as well. I went back in and added some more purple pigment to this page, so it feels complete. The next two pages are from the same still life setup. And one of the things I've been doing when I've been doing these still lives is kind of doing the still life, but then also doing a little bit of journaling about how it went. And so I wrote, when you think you know the shape of things, because we were looking at this piece of like old plumbing. And I noticed that I kept turning it towards myself, you know, orienting it more towards myself instead of seeing it more at an angle. So that was an interesting awareness that I had as I was drawing it. And then we noticed same thing here, right? Here's that same thing. I try to draw the still life twice so I can play with how I'm looking. And then the other thing that was in our still life was a dried hydrangea, and then this vase that we all noticed. Our eyes kept trying to make the two sides the same, but they were very much different. So this one was about like kind of putting my hand down on the table and really, really looking. So this is the white ink and Faber Castell white ink markers and fine point markers and a little bit of Ponty crayon. And then my final edit on this to fix my drawing was to just cut away the black paper. So now I have this page that exposes a little bit of this other page, but otherwise feels pretty white and blank. So I'm going to give myself a good barrier here with the clear blender crayon to kind of tell myself, don't go beyond this line, because if you do, it's going to go onto that other page. So one of the things that I discovered that I really like about this clear blender is it's a lot thicker, and it really is like almost like a bumper or a curb for your materials. It reminds you to stay on the other side of this line. I go all the way around the edge of this page. So now I have a page that has kind of a weird shape to it. So I could either go with that shape or do something else entirely. I think what I'm going to do is, haven't played with it a lot in this journal, is take the Copic marker that I received in this box. I really like the color. And this one I am going to go over the edge of my line because I know this side is safe. I'm not going to get onto my still life drawing. And when we're drawing something, one of the ways that we do that is with searching lines, right? And I have talked about this before, but I think about these types of lines as my thinking lines. And it's like, what am I going to do next with this page? No matter what, I know that this will build an interesting texture into what I'm up to. And sure enough, it worked, because I thought of what I want to play with on this page. Actually, I have two different options. Okay, so I have these two that are, this is from a Life magazine. I think it's from something else I cut out. And they just, these characters are so funny to me. And I kind of like the idea of putting them in here with something else that's about this interaction. So they certainly adhere better if I did them this way. And the interesting thing about doing that, it's almost like then they really are in their own little world, right? They're not interacting. Whereas here, she seems like the antagonist and he seems like dismissive, right? Whereas here, it's kind of like two different reactions to the same thing, perhaps. Right?
Erin, I have to come on here and tell you that I love this ephemera that you just brought in.
They're so great, right?
They are so great, and there's so many options. I have like so many ideas flying through my head right now of what I want to put underneath.
Yeah, and look
Like,
at
what are they looking at? What are they eating? What's going on?
look at her outfit. Like, why do we not have this fabric?
Love it.
Yeah, like, is there something that, or does she have like one of those bull horns that she's screaming into? I can imagine, what if he was drinking out of one of those like twirly straws? It's just going into the side of his mouth. I mean, there's a lot of fun that could be had with these two. So I think they're definitely gonna look here. And this is kind of some of the stuff we were talking about this weekend, where this paper is very fragile. And I'm going to be very careful with it, knowing that it might rip a little bit, but that's okay, because I'll just kind of piece it back together. Like, I can see that last little bit down there, it's definitely going to rip apart. And that's okay. I can just slice it back in. I'm just going to do it on purpose. And here, where the page was folded, this was where it was folded in the magazine. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that. Put him in here. I'm imagining their tone of voice also. Put that here, and then I've got this last little end, so I'm gonna splice this back in. Okay. When I can, with a piece of vintage magazine paper like this, I try to keep that cool edge, right? This like torn out edge from the original magazine. This will work out well because I think it'll work well with the shape of this page as it already is. So the other thing to look at here is I managed to get their eyes at the same level mostly. So that just compositionally is satisfying to see. Yeah. Trim this here. And I'll put this back in. So especially with vintage paper, I really try to use every last little bit of it that I have. So since I was using the Copic marker there, this is really thick paper that I put in, so it's okay to put more of this Copic on this side. Right up to the edge of my wax. And if you haven't played with Copic markers or any kind of alcohol-based markers on vintage magazine paper, see what an interesting color it's getting there. Fun observation about the way different media react not only to each other, but to the different papers that we, or surfaces that we use. What I wish that I had was some kind of fabric that would mimic her clothing. And I see there's a little bit of it down here I don't want to miss. I'm going to rip this here. We add a little bit of her on this page. A little bit of this wonderful fabric. Okay, so I could go serious with this page, or I could go funny. And just the way that their mouths are shaped, to me, look like they want to be speech bubbles. Other thing that I have on my desk are these nail stickers that I got from someone. And that might be interesting to put inside a speech bubble. So I've also got this paper that has either the diamond plate pattern or this, and this kind of like the idea of maybe I'm just thinking about this because I'm working on a chapter right now for a book about graphic medicine. So got speech bubbles on the mind. There's one for her. You could experiment with, oh, that's kind of nice too, the patterns. So I'll let it sit that way for a bit while I think about it. Should let us know in the chat which side I should put them on, the plain metal or the diamond plate steel. It's a little smaller. So when I'm doing something like this, I'm looking at the negative spaces around it. I don't want to lose too much of that other thing there. So if I flip it this way, It's actually kind of better, 'cause it's like he's talking out the side of his mouth, and it goes with the line of where his mouth goes. So I think he definitely wants to be that way, but I think I like that better. Line that up just at the crease of his mouth. That's really fun. I think the last thing I'll add to this for right now is just a little bit of a tiny bit of watercolor. If you use alcohol ink over the top of the wax and then come back over with watercolor, you kind of get that pure line of the paper back. Because the brush that you're putting the watercolor on will scrub the alcohol ink off of the wax. And I'm using vintage paper. I also look at the tone of the color. So these old Life magazines, a lot of them have more of a warm tone, which you can see because I'm coming on here with a slate black and I've got this blue on here. There's kind of this back and forth between warm tone, dark, and light tone. Sorry, warm and cool. Just adding this color is starting to make this, helping to make this page feel more complete and less like a bunch of random things that have been attached here, a bunch of random marks. So my thinking marks with those blue lines help something interesting happen on the page. Even though I don't have any more of that flower pattern, I do like the way this is coming together. And I might not put words in their speech bubbles. The nice thing about that aesthetically is that it can mean many different things depending on when you look at it, or depending on who looks. Okay. I'm pretty satisfied with how that page looks. I'll probably come back and look at it again. What I am seeing is that my fingers peeking around on this other page. And I want to go over there and just do a quick finish up of that page. Right now, where it's peeking over, looks not that interesting. I'm going to use some of that same watercolor I was using on the other page. And just go right around the edge of the tracing of my hand. I think another thing to think about when you're finishing a journal is that nothing in it is done until you decide that it is. So a page like this that was really done in one sitting doesn't have to be done just because it represents a certain time and place. I can come back in and do what I'm doing now, where I'm adding in some more color so that it works better within the flow of the rest of the journal. Okay. That page feels done, that page feels done. Now I have this page that I just will brush some matte acrylic onto, and it doesn't know what it wants to be yet, but it's got this nice alcohol ink bleeding through, which, again, I know some people have feelings about that, but I really love the bleed through from strongly pigmented material, because it means that you're not turning the page to a blank page. Right? So when I encounter a page like that, I like to just put down a bunch more pigment and kind of stay with that same color situation I was using before. And here you can see the way that acrylic paint can act as a resist against water media, right? The acrylic paint is kind of shining through where that water media is coming on top. Now that page is going to be ready to receive something. I'm going to put a little bit more of this watercolor onto this, and then I'm going to turn the page so it'll go over onto that next page there. Okay.
Hey, Erin, just jumping in here real quick. We're halfway through class, so you got about 45 minutes left.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so here's that page I did during our watercolor, or sorry, now I'm doing it, Sarah. World Collage Day, and I'm gonna go ahead and trim this page. It feels done. So giving the journal a haircut. So this page I started last night to prepare for today. And I did that same thing where I put the clear blender crayon around the edges. And then I started using the Lyra aqua brushes on here. And then I went back over with more of the clear blender crayon over some of the lines, knowing that some of this will move around when I put water onto it. And then some of it will stay, right? So you can see right there where the crayon resist is keeping some of the color just as it was put onto the page, and some of it is blended. I really liked those fine lines, so I wanted them to stay. And I really wanted that little message to myself to try new things. And, you know, I thought that would be kind of a fun thing for you all to explore in your art journal, is like, okay, so this was spring. How did it go? And what did you learn? And what are your goals for your continued journaling practice? So mine always, 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 and forever will be try new things, right? Because always new art materials to try, and there's always new combinations of art materials to try in my journal. It's why I like to switch things up a lot in how I journal, so that it's always new and exciting. Very fun. And this can become maybe a spot to do a little bit more writing. It might be a spot to do specific. What am I going to try new things? Home, at work. And in my art. So spring resolutions, spring promises, maybe that's a better way to put it. Spring promises to yourself, and fill a whole art journal page with that. So this is the point that I think a lot of you end up getting stuck when we're approaching, like this is our last live stream for this box. There's a little bit of time still until the next box ships. And some of you might look at the number of pages that are left and feel really nervous about that. Like there's not enough pages. What am I going to do? And some of you might look at the number of pages that are left and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's so many pages left in my journal. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what you can do. And one of the things is use some of these blank pages as like the cleanup crew, meaning take some of those little scraps that are sitting around on your desk. So like here are the scraps from just making those speech bubbles. And if I put them here on the surface, that already starts to become a composition, right? It already starts to become something interesting. So I am just going to go for it with these guys and glue them down. And who knows what it might turn into. So take stock of what's sitting around, like what ephemera you maybe haven't used yet, or materials that are sitting around on your desk. What's around that you might put into your journal as a jumping off point. And as a way to maybe quell any of that anxiety you have about like, I have to finish this. I'm going to show you with one media what I've done and what I've done before. You don't have to do this, but just know that it is a thing that you can do. Okay. So I'm going to let that be there for a minute so I can show you this. But sometimes I will have a journal and just go, I have a new journal and I want to start my new journal. And I don't want to wait for this one to be done. And so I will just take a pen, and I've done this several times where like maybe the journal felt too big and I didn't want to carry it around anymore. Otherwise, sneak peek. And I've just done lines like this, just like straight through onto all these pages. Some of you might be screaming right now. But it's very freeing to give yourself an out, and also to take away, like we've talked about so many times, that blank page anxiety. So once I get to these last couple pages, they're not blank pages anymore, right? They're pages that I've started that I can continue working in. So now it doesn't feel quite so scary. Right. Let's go back to this one. And some of these start to look like speech bubbles, they look like other things, but they also create a texture that I can use for rubbing. Now, on this page, they don't look like text bubbles at all. This is a very old faded crayon. It was kind of that color, and it faded because it sat in my office in Alameda for a very long time during the pandemic. and somehow moved back home and then moved here, and here it is to live another day. So again, there's my block line. This page is not empty. And because those were Lyra water-based, like, look, this is already getting much more interesting, right? It's going to become an interesting home for something. And then each page that has that line through it, that line can have a different purpose. So I have this, which is something, again, that's been kind of hanging out in my art journaling collage material for a while. And what I think it is something that I think we've talked about before, maybe a long time ago, called ephemera writing, which is, it looks like writing, but it doesn't actually say anything. It's just the motion of writing. It's just been floating around in my stuff, and I think because it's not supposed to be writing at all, I'm going to fragment it a little bit more as I glue it down. So sometimes when I put the glue on the back of something, before I stick it down, I'll realize, actually, I want to cut that apart a little bit. A little better to realize that before you stick it down onto the page. So now I have this kind of this above and below thing happening. These pieces of ephemera. Watercolor ink I'm going to put here. Especially as you're getting to the end of the journal, let yourself be messy. And that can feel a little intimidating because maybe you have some masterpieces earlier in your journal and you're afraid of messing them up. But just know that everything that you're doing in here is just enriching everything that came before. Any of the pigment that bleeds through, any of the wrinkling, fingerprints, any of that just becomes part of the story of your journal. Look how beautiful that little area there is where the ink is bleeding. And here I can almost make that line disappear. So maybe elsewhere I want it to stand out a little bit more. So if you haven't experimented with this yet with the Lyra pens, you can draw with them right into wet paper. But just know that you don't want to do that too much. And you want to dry it off on something dry afterwards. There's another blank page, and with this one, I have another like really beautiful image from a vintage magazine thing, and I just love these. This has been one that's been kind of hard to cut out, and I think today is going to be the day that I'm going to take at least one of these out, knowing that I can use the other ones at other times. It's a little tricky with glass things, right? Because they show the other glass things that are behind them. So you have to get a little creative when you're incorporating this in. Show you what I mean in a sec. So here I can see the other part of that image back there, which I might not want. So I'm going to glue this down and then we'll play with it a little bit more with some other media so that it feels more like its own thing and less like, oh, you took that out of somewhere else. Move it up a little bit. See what I just did? I made the edge of the table become the line of the page. Even though I lose a little bit of the top of this, that felt important. And so here I have, this has Mod Podge mixed with some gray acrylic, and this is white acrylic. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this here. Knowing that I can come back in later with probably some, maybe some graphite on top to blend this a little bit more with some ink. And then up here, that's the window. You see the top of that other one, so I'm going to disappear that a little bit. So it already looks better, right? It already looks like this cloche is by itself, and it doesn't have anything inside it yet. So I know I can also hide some of this with some person or thing or something inside this little cloche. Don't be afraid to edit your collage material and make it your own. If you get it really wet, just up to the edge of the line, you can see it's going to bleed down, but not up. Oh. Okay, I have something kind of funny that might work well with this. This this I pulled out of a Sierra Club magazine, and I made a photocopy, so I was giving it to an older adult who I work with who really likes these standtail frames. But we thought it was very funny. She also comes to my yoga classes, so we thought it looked like he was doing a forward fold and looking at his own knees. But it might be kind of funny to put him over here. I like that idea. So I'm going to cut right where the edge of his little leg is. Just keep looking at his knobby little leg. And put him above that black line. And this is where, you kind of have to make a decision when you are coming up to the gutter of, if I put it here, it'll glue better, but I'll lose a little bit of the back of his head. If I go all the way over there, I think I can do it so I don't lose any of his beak and I don't lose any of his legs into the fold. As you get to the back of your journal, your fold line becomes quite a bit more of an issue. So for this, I want to fold my image first. Glue on there. And then I'm going to refold it and shove that folded part into the gutter of my book. It's up a little bit higher than I would have wanted, and that's okay. Learned very early from my mom that there are no mistakes in art, and sometimes that's hard hard to believe, but it really is true. You can just make it work. Here on the edge. I'm gonna have to get a whole fistful of these clear blender crayons because I really loved using them into collage. It's become a really fun part of my practice. I'll have to stock up on those the way I do on my glue sticks. I think they're in the shop, right, Sarah? Sure they are. All right, so this cage turned into something really fun. I will maybe play with it a little bit more, but I really like how that's coming out. So I'm just going to put a little bit of wax paper on this because of the acrylic. And this one, I'm going to make this straight line have more of that resist. And maybe actually what I'll do on this one is play with, since resist has been our theme of this box as far as like the different techniques we've been playing with. This is a white crayon. So we talked at the very beginning in the first live stream about the difference between using a white crayon and using a clear blender crayon. And then we'll go to an off-white peachy color. This colored pencil stick, also in white. So visually at this point, there's not a lot to see yet because it becomes activated by the media that you put on top. So with this, I think we'll go to another, it would be something really, really concentrated. So this is liquid watercolor. Also. So you can see the different ways that these different media create a resist and create line work. And you can even see it when I'm doing the brushing, right? You can see how that the wax and the white crayon really pushed it away quite a bit. Whereas the colored pencil just is a very subtle resist. And let's do a different color of ink above. This seems to be my complementary color palette of the moment right now. So this will become a really interesting background for something. Again, like maybe it's a big collaged word, maybe it's something interesting from my ephemera that I want to add here. Become something. I couldn't resist doing that. That's very wet. I'm going to set it aside. And before we go to Sherry, I want to show you a little journal I've been playing with. And this one is a bunch of paper that I was using while I was teaching to show some different techniques to students, and then I stapled it together and adhered a bunch of tissue paper to cover the ends where the staples were sticking out. So I've been having a lot of fun in this little book because it already had, a lot of the pages looked like this already with tissue paper and melted wax on them. And this is that same acrylic paint you saw on the other page. This one has some watercolor and some tissue, but there's also a lot of matte medium and other media on here. So you can see the way that that bright orange melted crayon resists a little bit different than spots where the matte medium is. And then it's going to look very different than just brushing onto a page with no media at all. I mean, no resisting media. The other thing that's on this is that Mod Podge misting spray that I told you about. So I can again wipe away with my finger or maybe with another brush and get back a little bit to the white of the page. Here, I was showing this to Lee and Sarah the other day. These textures are just so satisfying to me. This is where the ink went through crackles in the melted crayon and created these wonderful textures that I'm really excited to play with. So I'm going to write a little message, a little goal for myself. Play more, and art is play. And that is a good thing for all of us, no matter what our age is, no matter what our work is. We all need more time to play, enjoy color and experimentation and enjoy. So, all right. Why don't we see if anyone would like to share while some of these things dry? Got a lot of messy things around.
I just put a snack in my mouth. I'm sorry.
That was the question that I asked the residents that I work with today. What is the best afternoon snack? And wow, we got some really good answers. But I think speaking to this idea of play and also not taking ourselves so seriously, one person just said, the best afternoon snack is a nap.
Amen. That is quite genius.
Life goals, right?
I will argue that another great afternoon snack is an art snack.
Yes.
But, you know.
I should have said.
With that said, would anybody like to share what they've been working on tonight? Feel free to turn your cameras on. You can visibly raise your hand or virtually raise your hand, and I will highlight you. A lot of these Monday night sessions end up being like workshops, so it is understandable if you just want to keep your head down and keep working.
Or if my black line just caused you to have total abject panic.
Yeah, you just kept going, and I'm like, is she done?
The first time I did that was a really big journal with watercolor paper in it, and I just felt like I couldn't finish it, and I took a big one of those thick Sharpie markers and did that through the whole thing, and then I felt so much better, and then I was able to finish that journal. But it was like a really big book with thick paper, and it just felt like I don't want to carry this thing around anymore. I just want it to be done and help.
That's awesome. Well, we still have just under 20 minutes left of class, so Erin, feel free to carry on and then we'll check in at like 7 or 8 minutes left.
I'm gonna let this drip a little bit. And open up another journal, please. To be the receiving end of that drip. Apologies for any of the focus chaos while I do that. Okay, here we go. All right. So speaking on this idea of like one page informing the next, I did this page the other day in Open Studio, I think, and I just glued down a piece of watercolor onto this paper. This is really, really thin paper in this book. And I was playing with this page and just kind of making a little mess with it. And then I did some Olo play on this page. So this is just like layers and layers and layers of Olo markers going back and forth and making an interesting pattern. And the reason I was doing this is because I wanted it to bleed through on these other pages. But then I was looking at this page and all you can see was just the Olo marking here. So I took those colored pencil sticks and did this rubbing so that you could see where that rectangle was from the other side and a little bit of the texture of the watercolor paper. So then this started to get really interesting and I incorporated more watercolor onto it and some more crayon. And it's really fun to me to see what happens when you bring a pretty pigmented material over these alcohol markers, because they also create a little bit of a resist. It's, again, subtle, but it's there because they, put a little bit of alcohol into the paper. So it's, I think just really, really interesting to see the different ways that that idea of one material pushing another away can create interesting designs and different things in your journal. So you see what I mean about this color palette? It just keeps coming up right now. And I've noticed that at different times in my life, and maybe you've noticed that as well, like different color palettes that kind of speak into you at different times. It's not necessarily seasonal. Sometimes it's about the materials that are around, right? Like if I get a new paint marker and it's in a special color, and that kind of becomes my focus of a lot of things for a while. But you've seen over the course of these pages that I've been playing with today that this same palette just keeps coming up in turquoisey blues and orangey yellows. I don't know if it's a springtime thing or these are colors that I always like, so it could be that also. But I've definitely had different color focus, different parts of my life. Okay, I'm gonna leave this page and go to this one, which is the original spot for these Olos. And here, I think I want to play up on this purple, just so I can get out of that color a little bit. So I've got some blue on the brush still, adding a purple. And I like having the combination between where the watercolor is bleeding and then where you can see the brush, the lines of the brush stroke. Into this. A little bit of the Lyra markers. These are definitely, these Lyra aqua brush are going to become a staple in my art journaling kits. They're so versatile and they really have a lot of pigment to them. Great for writing things also. So giving yourself permission to just do some writing, not knowing where it's starting, not necessarily with a prompt, and letting it be a record of your day or a record of whatever else is going on for you while you're journaling. When you're using thin paper like this journal, you have to be a little careful when you go back in with a harder media like this crayon. This is a gigantic crayon. It's almost comical, but it is much harder, so it could rip this thin paper, so you have to be a little bit careful. But it allows me to preserve some of the lighter colors on here as I put more of the dark pigment down. And especially for something like this where I really love the effect of these Olo layering, I don't want to lose too much of it by putting dark watercolor lines over the top. Okay, this is beginning to be one of those pages that I just need to stop. Otherwise it'll be too much. So I'm gonna stop. And set that one over there. And see how our drying is going with this one. This one's drying pretty well, pretty nicely. So that leaves me with just a few pages left to sew with these black lines. So I promise that I will continue to evolve different ways to work with those black lines. I'd be so curious to hear your reaction to that, to drawing those black lines or doing something similar, and see how it impacts you in your work. One thing I'll do really quickly, and then maybe we can see if anyone would like to share, is one way you could handle it is to just cut right along that black line, right? And so then now you've kind of done yourself a little bit of a problem in that now you have more pages. But again, if you are looking at your art journal and realizing there's a little while still till the next journal ships, then maybe you do want to make yourself more little micro pages to play on. So you also just decide you're going to glue that back together later. So why don't we see if there's anyone else who would like to share?
Erin, just adding on that real quick, we have a question from Rodney. What other creative ways can you show us to bridge pages? I'm a believer that journals are bettered with connected pages.
So one of the big ways, Rodney, is with color and also with pattern, right? So if I look at this, and I've got kind of 4 different parts of it. So knowing that if I'm going to do some marks over here on this side, that I want to find, at least for me, I don't like to work in even numbers. So I want to find at least 3 other ways that I can incorporate that color onto this page with different mark making. Okay, so now I have 3 different forms of mark making in this journal using the same color palette, and it already feels a little bit more cohesive, right? And then the other way is having elements that go across the page, which I did here, right? So not saying there's marks over here with the wide brush marks, and then here is just a wash, and then here are these marks, but having them go from one page to the other, so it moves your eye. So if I have maybe a figure or a word that's here, these little marks will help bring my eye over onto this side. So that's one way. And the other way is what I've showed before, which is putting the frame around the whole page. Hopefully that helps. And it's also just okay sometimes if pages feel a little chaotic, or they feel like disjointed, like a collection or like a crazy quilt maybe. And that's okay too. Sometimes I have pages like that.
I think that's great feedback. Anybody feel like sharing what they've made tonight? Or if you joined us on Saturday, Let us know if you want to share what you made for World Collage Day.
Or if you want to share the side view of your journal.
No pressure. Erin, I think you've turned into the Bob Ross of art journaling.
I'm gonna have to get some bigger hair.
Yeah, because
I-
sometimes it's just relaxing to watch, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because like, look what's happening, because that pigment really soaked into the page, and then when I brushed across it, so interesting, right? And then
Mm.
I turn this page and keep going with that.
So interesting. We have let's see, we have some comments here in the chat. People are still working, some people are just watching, totally fine. Tell us more about special watercolor materials you use on paper? Question
Yeah.
mark.
So, do I like really nice watercolor paper? Yes, I do. And do I like to use really nice watercolors on paper that maybe is not meant for watercolor? Yes, I do. Why? Because this kind of stuff happens. You may have seen when I did that big wash of color that it kind of did this weird thing. Like you can see it happening here where it almost looks like a salt effect because this paper is not sized for watercolor, right? And so that means that watercolor is going to act in atypical ways. So I really like to mix a lot of watercolors and gouache together in my journal. Again, you're going to get different effects and so different, emotional content from them, for lack of a better way of saying it, meaning like, straight from the tube, watercolors are going to have a different effect than like watercolor palette that you've been working with for a long time. And so none of the colors are straight from the tube anymore. So it feels more maybe organic or more personal. And I really like to throw out all the rules with using materials. And that can seem a little bit scary, but it's also how you get things to be more interesting and authentic in your journal. So I like watercolor markers. I like straight up watercolors. Sometimes I'll paint with my niece's watercolors, like cheap kid stuff, and that's also fun. So,
And what are you using tonight? The Viviva?
yeah, I'm using the Viviva, and I was also using the concentrated.
Right.
And what I like about this one, you saw that happen on that orange page, is this, you really, because it's so concentrated, when you brush it away after you let it soak into the page a little bit, you keep the line. See how that line stays? Whereas with some other liquid watercolor, if I brushed over it like this with a wet brush, I would lose that line. So I really, really like the concentrated watercolor for adding a lot of color very fast and also preserving these interesting line marks that I could play with. So look, here I am again, like going back to that same color palette. I need to just switch out the colors that are here on my desk, I think. I'll hide some colors for myself for a little while.
We have another comment here. Can you show watercolor on one page and gouache on the other? Erin, if you happen to have it on you,
I don't have
I
any
think go
gouache
for it.
in reach right now.
Okay. Maybe that's a mix post or something.
Yep.
Sorry, Rodney. We have about a minute left. Anybody else feel like sharing or have a question, a prompt? This is our last live stream for this box. I know it's, I'm sorry.
Want to tell them when the next one ships?
The next one ships early June, I think first week of June. So keep an eye out for that. We have on, I believe it's the 22nd is our ephemera hour. So please join us for that. I know Erin's been collecting. This is the first time I've been lacking on the collecting ephemera. So I have some time to catch up.
All right, with our last minute, let me just show you this one other very satisfying texture here. So this is, I put a melted wax crayon with a heat tool onto this paper. And then I put a material you'll find out more about in the next box onto this paper, and it bled the pigment on, and then I put more watercolor, and then I kind of crinkled the paper. And look at these wonderful wrinkly, it almost looks like images taken of the earth from above, and these are like little tributary streams or something. Totally unplanned, so satisfying. So this is why it's fun to play with different media all together.
Love it. And I'm just triple checking our shipment schedule because there are questions. Let's see, 2024. Yes, we have apologies, I misspoke. The ArtJournalSnacks is shipping out in July. ArtSnacks is shipping out in June. So yeah, I know Erin has some travels happening in June. So Jill, great catch. But you can always catch Erin on the Instagram on Mix. But this is our last live stream as a group like this. And then we'll have ephemera hour. Oh, amazing. All right. Well, Erin, thanks so much for doing this again live. And for everyone who joined us live, thank you as well. Everything looks great. Make sure you post whatever you made on the ArtSnacks Mix group. We'd love to see it. And then this live stream will be saved and posted probably tomorrow. So you can watch the playback as well. All right.
Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you guys.